Welcome back. Tracy, tell me about growing up. Your father was in the Navy.
Mm-hmm.
A slightly different example of life in the military than mine, for example. My parents, we moved around a lot, but you were quite settled in your growing up time.
Yeah, that's right. My first move was at 6 days, moving from Nambour, where I was born, down to Sydney.
Good timing?
Yeah, it was. It was very, it was quite good timing. But yeah, we were very lucky. We stayed in one location for most of my formative years.
In New South Wales?
In New South Wales.
Yep.
Prior to that, we'd been in Singapore for a couple of years. Dad was posted over there, but I don't have many real memories of that time. But we came back, and there were a few moves, but essentially we stayed at a little place called East Hills, the East Hills Naval Estate, which was nestled between the Holsworthy firing range and the Georges River. The army people didn't like us terribly much, I don't think. But there were about 170 families there on the naval estate, and we connected with civilisation or the other were via a footbridge over the Georges River, which took us into East Hills proper. So we went to school in mainstream public schools. I know a lot of the army children went to army base schools. Certainly they did at Holsworthy. So we had to connect with, outside of military life throughout my childhood, and it was really important to my mum that we experienced that we didn't become in a glass bubble of, hanging only with military families or naval families, so that we can experience. So most of my friends were children from the suburbs outside of the naval estate. But of course, you always had a connection to those kids that that shared your weekends and life with parents in the in the services.
Was it good growing up? Because I dare say it sort of goes with having a parent in the military that your father would have been away a fair time, and it can put a lot of pressure on home life.
Yeah, my mum was fantastic though. They worked really, really hard to keep us connected with family. We used to visit.
Other siblings?
I have a brother, Michael.
Yep.
He's a couple of years younger than me. No, because we lived in a housing area where every other kid's father was away for long periods of time, I don't know that it was that noticeable. We certainly used to like it when he came back from up top, which was generally Southeast Asia, because we'd meet the boat and the fathers had come off with, it was like Santa Claus. We'd be waiting for the toy that they'd bring back. They were all pretty fabulous. But now I sit back as an adult, I understand how hard it must have been for Dad to go away for several months at a time, having a wife that looked after the family home very, very well, was almost mother and father in his absence. And a lot of the naval fathers, and I'm not so sure how it was with other military fathers, would come home and they'd have to re-find their place in the family unit, and which was quite difficult for them to do, because it was still of a generation where the man was the head of the family, but they had wives that were doing both roles in their absence. And it wasn't something that struck me as anything at the time, other than I remember when he would come back, there was a settling in period, when on his return.
It wasn't back in the day when we had people helping you out of how to find your way through that and offer you tactics and ways that you can deal with these issues that may arise.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it was would have been a difficult time for the service personnel, whether they were mainly dads in the Navy, and I don't think on our estate there were any female naval personnel. But to come back and to try and reconnect with the family when you had been disconnected for so long, it's different now. You've got mobile phones and internet and the whole, and that suite of things that you can use to connect with your family. But we had a really, really great life. We were loved and we were cared for, and my parents did everything that they could to make ours a normal and happy life. And so yeah, I had a lovely life. I don't recall it being anything but that.
I think it was good for your parents having your father in the armed services and being away. Was it a hard time for them? Do they look back at it with the fondness that you obviously do?
Well, I'm not sure. I guess I'd have to ask them. But my mum met my father when he was in the Navy, so was totally aware of, you know, what it was all
Very
about.
much a part of Australian culture back in the 60s.
Yeah,
as well. Yeah.
that's right. And so she just, you know, Mum's one of these people that if you have to get something done, you don't fiddle around, you just get it done. And that's how she's always been, and I gather that's what she used to, you know, to keep us connected as a family for the period of time that Dad was away.
Do you remember that time when you were ready to move on to that next stage in your life? Did you have a career, a plan in mind for where you'd be in 5, 10, 20 years' time after leaving school?
I actually didn't have a plan. I went to university for about 6 months. I started a Bachelor of Journalism and found that really wasn't my thing. And I'd been in the Army Reserve at high school in artillery, and I guess once a military or once a service person, always some connect, you know.
It's kind of the obvious option, isn't it?
So I joined the Army Reserves, and midway through my that year of university, I decided that I would like to join one of the services, and I decided that I would join the Army, which was different to what, you know, I didn't want to follow in Dad's footsteps. And I remember him saying to me, well, if you're going to join, you've got to be an officer. That was his only requirement. So I applied with 3,000 or 4,000 other young ladies for 20-odd spots at what was then RAC School at Georges Heights in Sydney, and after some exhaustive interviewing and sporting activities, was accepted. Yep. So I went into, joined the regular army then in January of 1982. And what was interesting about that is on entry, it was almost like a gentleman's agreement between the army and the cadet, and that was if the army didn't like you, they could say goodbye without any issue, and if it really wasn't your thing, then you could say thanks very much and move on to the next stage in your life. And that's exactly what happened with me. There were a number of reasons why I came to a decision that I wanted to leave the army. But I can tell you that in the 6 months that I was there, I learnt more about myself than I had learnt in the previous 19 years of my life.
All right. You're watching Meet the Ministers, and we'll be back again after the break.